Bam Pow Comic Hour with your hosts, Andrew Glonner
and Chris Ramos.
Tonight we are covering Daredevil by Mark Waid and various artists.
Yeah, and a whole slew of artists jumping in.
Yes.
Everyone wants to work with Mark Waid, I guess.
Right. So we like to pick, different interesting runs and groundbreaking runs. And so when we were looking at Daredevil, yes, we could have went back to Frank Miller, or we could have went to several other of the big runs, but we thought we'd look outside the box on this one and go for Mark Waid.
And even when Daredevil first started was like the 60s. I mean,
Yes.
He was like way back.
Yep.
Right when Spider-Man came out, Daredevil kind of came out at the same time. So they've always been kind of interwoven as far as characters. Although he started out in the yellow costume.
Yes.
And then whoever switched him to red was it. That was the greatest decision
Right.
for Daredevil.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. It was Stan Lee and Bill Everett, correct?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
he, Daredevil as a character, kind of, he goes up and down as far as readership and likability and things. Recently, like the last, 2, 3, 4 years, he's surged in popularity. That's pretty fair to say. It's probably because of the TV show, But
Yeah, I think it would get more
Netflix?
popularized by the Daredevil Netflix series. But as far as who's written them and who's drawn them, has probably been the most consistent and strongest writers and artists that have come across Marvel and DC Comics.
That's true. Well, and like when Frank Miller came in before this run, 2 times before this run,
Yep.
was the Frank Miller run. And, just to kind of fill everyone in, what they usually do is take blocks of writers, not necessarily blocks of artists, because artists they come and go a little bit because what artists want to do is they want to get on a popular title and they just want to do it so people notice them. It's sort of like jumping into a sitcom or something. Like you want to be noticed, right?
Yeah.
As an actor. So for artists, they want to say, oh, cool, let me draw some Daredevil. Oh, cool, let me draw some Spider-Man. Oh, yeah, I'll draw some Fantastic Four. And eventually someone says, hey, you know what? That style sticks to this character. And then they keep them. So Mark Waid is just one of many artists. I'm sorry, of many art writers who had a good run. You know. Frank Miller had a good run.
Yep, with Born Again.
Ed Brubaker.
Yes.
Ed Brubaker had an amazing run.
Yep.
And
Joe Quesada had a big run with Kevin Smith.
Yep. And then now it's Mark Waid. That's what we chose.
Right. And so this is a very unconventional Daredevil run in the grand scheme. Ed Brubaker was his predecessor in the writer's bullpen of this. And so Ed Brubaker put Daredevil through the ringer. Yeah. And even before that, Brian Michael Bendis even put him through the ringer harder. So there was 2 back-to-back, like serious dark runs that just broke the character
left you
down.
Drained.
Left you drained. I mean, yes, but they're very well written. Yeah. You should definitely go read them. Poor guy. He can't catch a break, can't keep a girlfriend alive. That's the infamous thing with Daredevil. Is he has bad times with relationships. He can get them, just can't keep them. And so Mark Waid, he went about this as he still likes to test Daredevil, but in different ways, and give him like this sarcastic approach, I guess, to the character, where he's still being a lawyer, he's still being a crime fighter, but he's a little more quippy. Yeah. And, he's not taking everything so seriously. And the purpose of that was to hide his depression. He's like, you're not, was it his crime partner, Foggy? He's like, why aren't you talking about your problems? Why aren't you seeing somebody? He's like, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. I'm internalizing everything.
Yes.
Daredevil is kind of an interesting character. I like the fact that he still holds on to a secret identity. I think that's cool.
Yes.
And that's been sort of a crutch of his through the years,
right.
Just like it is for Spider-Man.
Yes.
And Give me one more. Batman, I suppose. But
Yeah.
anyone who has a secret identity is still holding to that sort of old school way of thought of, they're protecting the people they love and they don't want the villains to find out who they are, because then their whole world comes crashing down.
Right.
And
so the run before this,
I
think it was at the end of the run where his identity was outed.
And that, is kind of a fun thing. I think as a writer is leaving, they're like, Daredevil's, everyone knows he's Matt Murdock, and then he leaves. And
it's a cool writing exercise, really, just to see how can you play on those tropes. Spider-Man, they did it, and they had to reset it, do a hard reboot of it just to make it kind of make sense. It's okay if like the superhero community knows who he is, but not the public.
Yeah. And so Daredevil has always played, his alter ego. Well, I shouldn't say his real life person is a lawyer, and he's a blind lawyer, and he's very good at it because he uses the skills that he has, the special abilities he has as Daredevil, to sort of win cases and read people's body language and read their heart beats and stuff like that. I guess
if you don't know anything about Daredevil and Matt Murdock, so
is this an origin story?
This is at the beginning of every volume and almost every other issue, they remind you about the origin. So we're going to tell you about the origin part.
Sit back.
So young kid, he grows up around his father, battling Jack Murdock. He's a big boxer, just trying to support his his son, Matt, and
in Hell's Kitchen
in New York City. And so one day, Matt gets hit by a car, saving an old lady, I think it was, or somebody older person.
Yeah, jumped in front of a
they were
a truck, the truck carrying radioactive.
Back in the day, it was carrying radioactive materials and splashed his eyes. Such a hokey 60s thing, but it worked.
The worst thing in the 60s was to have a giant barrel of radioactive waste.
Yes, just hauling around in the back of your truck, as you do. And so it hits him, splashing his eyes, and he gets the ability. He gets blinded, but all of his senses get cranked up to about 100. And he also develops a radar sense, like bats.
Yeah, so like he sort of has sight, but not like we do. He has. Actually, they do a great job illustrating.
I think so too.
Volumes.
This is like the first time they've really dug into how Daredevil perceives.
And they drew it like you would see sort of the lines, like the contour lines of radar. And it's neat because it pops into Daredevil vision, and you see the scene in front of you as various contoured lines. So, I mean, I love that. They just kept doing that. And I think that was Mark Waid being like, hey, we need to get to how Daredevil can use his abilities.
And I think him and Palo Rivera, who was like the first artist or the first penciler that he worked with on this project, they kind of defined those things to carry out through this whole run.
Yeah. So then Daredevil decides he's going to continue being a lawyer because that's what he went to school for, and that he started his own law practice. But he's also going to be Daredevil at night because Hell's Kitchen is like the worst place. And
he doesn't want what happened to his dad, his family, and himself to happen to other people. So he wants to help out his community.
So,
be a superhero.
So one of the reasons why I like Daredevil is because of that secret identity, because it helps to, take a break from superheroing. I like the idea of it going back to just sort of him in the courtroom. There are some well-written courtroom dramas with Daredevil stories. Ed Brubaker did a great one because he's really into it. Bendis does a great one. And that's just kind of part and parcel with writing the Daredevil character. You have to be able to just sort of write his real life and not just come up with wacky characters for him to fight.
And when I was reading some of the interviews in the back of this first... not deluxe edition. Yeah, it's like a deluxe edition. It's oversized hardcover. There's interviews in the back of these, and this one had the interview with Mark Waid, and then they asked him, what's one of the challenges about this, writing Daredevil? And he's like, writing about courtrooms,
Yeah.
and being a lawyer, and how to make that interesting and colorful.
Yeah, right.
He's never really had an opportunity to do that a lot. So trying to make that interesting and lively for this reader, and especially for the tone he's giving for Daredevil, is a little bit of a writing challenge for him.
Well, the cool thing too is that they can take that story, it's happening in the courtroom, like Daredevil takes on a client that's battling the Italian mob or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, the Sons of the Serpent.
Yeah. And then when the courtroom's all done at night, he's like, I'm going to go get the real answers. And he goes down to the docks, starts fighting
always.
monsters.
Yeah.
And
That's
stuff,
how he gets all of his evidence.
So I think that's a good way as a writer to connect that world. Yeah. The other cool thing here, as we're kind of going through the first volume, what we did on this is there are omnibus for these volumes.
Yes.
There's 2 omnis, but we have the oversized hardcovers, which so there's 5 of those. Mm-hmm. And it's nice. They're smaller. And they're more manageable.
This is like a 50 issue run.
Yeah,
it's still like a really long run with a couple of like other crossover issues with Spider-Man and the Hulk that come up, but really it's mostly Daredevil. And for these all to be collected and in perfect reading order and everything, the art's still oversized. That's why it's called an OHC. And they're still really nice to pick up. And sometimes it's nice to have these skinnier volumes, because then you can just pick them up and put them in your lap or take them into a different room.
You just sit on the couch with them a little easier.
A little easier to handle than an Omni. But to each his own. If you have the Omnis, that's great. It's all there. I think it's 2 omnibus.
There's just 2, yeah. And they have all of the extra.
They're just a little harder to
content.
get. Yeah.
So we, decided let's, tackle this run. Now,
Daredevil's my favorite Marvel character, by the way.
Cough. I'm just gonna throw that out there. I would have to say, to be honest, through my life, I've read just about every superhero a little bit here and there, right? But like I've never been driven to collect Daredevil until I saw the omnibus.
Yes.
And I'm like, you know what? If I'm going to collect Daredevil, let me just try this one. Like I'm just going to jump into the whole run and just go from there. A lot of people in the comic community will tell you that Frank Miller, of course, was tasked with reinvigorating Daredevil. Frank Miller has a great skill in taking a character that people think they know and writing like a whole other version of them. Like,
totally.
So he did it with Batman. He did it with Daredevil.
Yeah, he did it with Daredevil first.
Yeah.
And then he did, yeah.
And so the nice thing is Daredevil has a good history to draw from. But as far as runs that you can get into and just start reading, any one of those collections are pretty much like you just jump into the character.
Yeah.
Even
not
the
a lot
Mark
of
Waid one.
Yeah. You don't have to know a lot of prior knowledge about who Daredevil is going into most runs of Daredevil. It's they usually give you a little synopsis of this is where he came from, like a couple pages, and then you kind of just go out to the races and see what this run's all about. Yeah.
So to start with the Mark Waid, what happens is he's just coming off of, like we said, the previous author sort of through this
outing of his identity.
Yeah, through the foul ball of like everyone knows who you are.
He's been through the ringer. It's coming off a very dark run.
And Daredevil just keeps saying, people are like, well, Matt Murdock, you are Daredevil. And he's like, oh, I wish I was. Oh, I'm not. So he kind of keeps dodging it a little bit.
Yes.
The public doesn't know for sure that he is or is
and
not.
And I believe in the last run, at the end of it, he did end up trying to sue the Daily Bugle, the big newspaper for running the story and everything. And so, he's coming off the coattails of that. So the whole public trust thing is definitely an issue in this book.
Yeah, right away at the beginning. So he starts seeing his Daredevil persona as an escape. Like, you know what? I don't have people asking me when I'm Daredevil who I am, because he's doing other things,
He kind of discards his personal life at the start of this run.
Yeah.
And he tries to be all Daredevil most of the time.
And I think Mark Waid really shined in writing that because, part of it too is how do you write all of the abilities that Daredevil has in a good way, right? Like anyone can just have him battle villains. Yes. But Mark Waid does a really, really good job of establishing like, I'm on a page where he's just walking down the street and, he's walking down the street talking with Foggy, but in the background, there's all these little radar blips and there's people talking that he hears and there's cigarette smoke that he smells and there's bird wings flapping and there's cars and motorcycles.
You definitely feel like you're in New York.
Yeah. And you're like, Daredevil knows all of that.
And I think
he feels all of that.
Yeah. Palo Rivera definitely, I think, has a graphic design sense to him. Or at least maybe his editors did. And be like, wouldn't this be cool to jive with that?
Like just how to lay this out.
Because, you're dealing with a blind superhero, so you have to like put that perspective on. And that gives that, it gives it a fresh take on this, on Daredevil as well.
Yeah, there's even a part like, so his partner, Foggy, isn't in the best of shape. Or doesn't make the most healthy choices.
Yes.
And there's a part where Daredevil starts picking up their office because they're partners at their law firm. And he's like, he's picking up all of his
Cheeto bags.
Yeah,
you can smell the Cheetos.
All his fast food. He says there's enough what does he say? There's enough chemicals in here to just make me just go crazy. And he's picking it up. He's like, does he have an apple every once in a while?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And, Daredevil having all of his senses and hearing, just cranked up to like 1,000%, like smell and hearing is definitely like a huge part of his identity. And so that was another new thing Mark Waid did was he brought like the smell. He described what things smell like and how he's like attracted to women by certain smells and things like that. And then like the sonic things, like when people use like against him, they'll use like sonic weapons and he'll go, and he'll go.
Yeah. There's some great scenes too, where he is fighting.
And they do a really good job.
Claw.
Against like Claw, who's made of sound and he uses sound-based weaponry. That's definitely, it was a great villain for him because that's not a typical villain for the Daredevil to have, so it was really good to like to challenge him.
And just to bounce back and forth on that, like the artwork of real life and then the artwork of like what's Daredevil seeing and feeling, and then back to like real life explosions.
It flows really well.
Yeah, like Daredevil saying something, something just exploded or so, and he can kind of sense if he really concentrates, and that's the other thing too. So he generally has a good sonar, but if he stands still and just really, really focuses on it, he can start hearing
things from like a couple blocks away.
Distant noises, or he can really start like being in tune to his environment, feeling like bird wings flapping and perfume.
It helps that he's an acrobatic and and he's a lawyer and he has this detective mindset and all of that, but he has to juggle all these things at the same time. So he definitely has to concentrate really well.
So, as we kind of continue in, there's just, I think Mark Waid also sets up scenes in a smart manner. He wants to show Daredevil's abilities, but he also wants to show unique ways for him to, I guess, like, utilize those abilities. Right?
For sure.
Like, of course, everyone knows he can like leap rooftops or whatever, right? But like Mark Waid really makes sure that he uses his billy club a lot.
Right.
I really like that. His billy club is his walking stick, and then it turns into
and then it has like a grappling hook he put on
two-parted.
Yeah. But definitely his billy club he's always using it for. It's like his jack of all trades tool. He can do anything he wants with it. It's so cool.
And, there's other parts too where it's like he was on a boat and then he was like, I can't be on boats. I hate being on boats because if I ever fall in the water, I'm done. You know,
like you can't see much.
Yeah. So you're like, oh, I guess I never thought of that too. Right. You know, he likes buildings and he likes cities.
And that's also a callback to Frank Miller's run when he got, I think he got shot or something and he fell in the water.
Yeah.
And he has this whole epic scene of like Frank Miller describing like Daredevil trying to get out of the water and everything.
He does. So you don't know which way up.
Yeah, exactly. So he kind of harkens back. And that's another, we were talking about this in our little pre-show talk. Mark Waid is one of those people who knows his continuity and he knows his history very well.
Comics, and the really character. Well.
So him and like John Byrne and there's a couple other big writers and things that just know everything.
I want to say like Bendis probably.
Yeah, Bendis.
Maybe Hickman.
Bendis choose what he wants.
Yeah, and Hickman kind of makes his own.
Yeah. So I would say Waid and Byrne are probably the two biggest continuity nerds out there.
That they're like, this is how a character is supposed to act because there's 40 years of history of it, and this is how we're gonna make him act.
And there's things and decisions that kind of influenced him along the way. There's certain reasons why he won't go swimming, or he like Bullseye. Bullseye is his worst nemesis, and he treats him like crap. Because he killed his first girlfriend, major girlfriend, Karen Page. And
they're the ones to be like, remember in 1988 when he hated water? Well, we're going to still write that he hates water.
Right.
They know.
Right. Know. And so he definitely still brings, even though he still brings new villains or like not widely, like interesting pairings, I guess. Even though he does that, he still brings like Daredevil's rogues gallery into this, into these issues. And they're written so well. I just didn't get around to the Kingpin arc. They saved that for last, but I know he'll do a great job with that. But he does bring like the owl. The Spot was kind of a Spider-Man villain that he thought, oh, this would be cool to transition here.
Well, even like the Spot. So let's just pause on that for a minute. So the Spot is a old school villain. I mean, he's like Spider-Man. I think it was like
a silly one that they brought back.
Ago. Yeah, and he can make little portals, little black spot portals where he can like reach in and then like if he made a black spot on a table, he could reach into that and then make another black spot across the hallway and his hand would come out, So people always thought like, well, that's hokey. So what? He reaches into like a negative zone or something and then just, he can't step through it. He could always just sort of put body parts through it.
Yeah.
So everyone was kind of like made fun of him a little bit because it seemed hokey. But Mark Waid is writing it as, he's like the ultimate assassin. He's the ultimate, like, I'm going to get at you from, the street. I'm going to be in your house. And, there's parts of it where Daredevil can sense these holes appearing. So he kind of knows where these black spots are going to open. But even when they do open, Daredevil is called the man without fear.
Yes.
And he makes a comment in here. I forget which volume it is, but he says, people call me the man without fear because I can't see. And if I could see, I would be scared.
Yes. That happens. that happens around like volume 3, volume 4.
Yeah.
That
was
like
so cool. Like, you know what? That makes sense because he doesn't actually notice what he's caught up in.
Yeah.
He's not totally aware of it.
Yeah, like he can't drive, so he always has to have like his friends or stuff.
So like if there were crazy monsters appearing all around him, he wouldn't really like register that away.
He could register the silhouette of them, the smells, the how they sound and things like that, and how they speak, but you can't see like the full colors and things like that.
He's not overwhelmed by those details. So what he ends up doing even for Spot is he just grabs him and jumps in, and it's like he kind of smirks,
takes that leap of faith.
Mark Waid does that really well too. He writes him like he's smirking, he's laughing, he's having fun,
because he wanted to do that. He did that on purpose.
He's leaping off rooftops and sort of smiling, and he's just a guy, like Spider-Man. I think even if he ran out of web and fell, he'd probably still be okay, but Daredevil just takes it and just goes. And, the other part that I really like, there's some cool storylines in here. One of them is Daredevil steals a data storing device. It's like a like a flash drive idea, but it's
Yeah.
from the Fantastic Four. It's
from like an old adventure
uniform.
on the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
That's something only Mark Waid could come up with.
And so like, because their costumes, fun fact, their costumes are unstable molecules. So when Johnny starts on fire, it doesn't burn up. And when Mr. Fantastic stretches, it doesn't rip, because it's unstable molecules. Their costumes are actually just interacting gel molecules that just sort of like are together, but not together. So
science.
Yeah, science. That's just what it is.
Because science.
They're not spandex and they're not cotton. They are Reed Richards unstable molecules. And they just happen to hold themselves into a uniform shape. But Daredevil gets one of those that's torn off. And it turns out if you have unstable molecules, that they're really great for storing data. So he has, I don't know, files and data that's stored on him. Which, makes like a, like you said, a Mark Waid story, but also allows him to introduce a lot of villains who are sort of wanting that device.
Yeah. Oh, and because he plays this over like the first volume, almost the first 2 volumes, I would say.
I was just going to say, I think it goes into that.
And
too.
It was really cool how he just kind of kept building it and kept just kind of rolling all of these crazy things and upping the stakes, the ante with each issue and pacing those issues and details like over the top. And it was really cool to see it play out. I love that so much, because sometimes something like that could just it could be a couple issues and then it could get dropped off, whatever. And you just like, this is my long game. All right, let's see what I can build with this.
Yeah, and you don't want anything to be like a flash in the pan. You want it to really go through. If he's going to write an arc, then tie everything together.
Right. And he pretty much did that with the start of volume 1 and volume 2. Yes, there's like a story here or there, but and he has to enlist. That kind of gives us a good segue to his supporting cast for these volumes.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
So his supporting cast, we kind of talked about Foggy. Foggy is his other partner at the law firm. And they're both lawyers and stuff. So they've kind of grown up together, things like that. There are times when they both hate each other. And especially in these volumes, like it really tests their friendship to the point of they don't. They fight and they walk away from their law firm. And there's times where they come back together, and because of illnesses and things that could end their life, and they're like, well, we'll come together, we'll take care of each other.
And Foggy is such a good character to have.
Oh yeah.
He is the ultimate good friend.
Yes.
He just wants to.
You don't need a Robin for Daredevil. You need Foggy.
Yeah. Yeah. He wants to be a lawyer. He wants to be normal, and he wants to just have a good life. And he sees his friend,
his best friend,
being Daredevil and risking his life. And then he sees him just, start imploding their law firm. And he's like, hey, listen, we're building this together. And Foggy is a great grounding. Like, if you want a character that walks you through that world, Foggy is it.
He's your audience. Yes, he's us. He is the audience, and he's the reader. He's all of it. He wants to be the superhero, but he can't because he doesn't have those abilities. He's just a liar.
And he kind of wants him
and he's looking out for his best friend.
He wants him to stop doing it because, if you had abilities and you were a superhero and you never got really injured, well, that's one thing. But Daredevil, for some reason, people love just writing him like, just
gotta beat the hell out of
down to the bottom,
right?
Like, rock bottom every story.
But you could argue that he's the most grounded character of all the Marvel characters. Yeah, he's the most grounded.
And he's just a guy.
He's just a guy. Yep.
Yes,
he has superpowers, but they're not much of a radar sense. You can see he's a blind person that can see really well.
Yeah. and so as far as like even abilities, there's some parts where he's fighting, so some of the characters that appear are Captain America. And they kind of fight, which is cool.
Yeah, they kind of fight for a minute, and they're both pretty equal.
And Spider-Man appears, Black Cat appears.
Yes.
Punisher and his little
Agent Cole. Agent
Cole. The Doctor Doom appears. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really fun because
the Hulk appears.
What they used to do back in the day is when they would come up with a new character, they would throw in a really popular character. Mm-hmm. And that's why when Spider-Man was first starting, was it Spider-Man #1? He went to the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
Because the Fantastic Four were doing really well at that time.
Yeah. And that's how they would launch these characters.
Yeah. And so like when the X-Men were doing really well, they would introduce characters in the X-Men. And then when people said, hey, I really like that character, then they'd say, well, cool, we'll give them their own, comic book run. So Daredevil they just love having people show up and help him, or he helps their storyline, and they have interconnecting comic runs.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. And then Mark Waid introduces a new character because almost every writer wants to introduce a new character.
Yeah,
because if it ever takes off, they can use that.
They'd be like, I came up with Punisher. Yeah,
right. Yeah. So he introduced Agent McDuffie. First, she starts out as a DA, and then she realizes she can't live that life because she's dating Daredevil, so she has to walk away from it. But she was a really interesting, cool character to follow along. I kind of see the relationship grow and ebb and flow. I think that was really cool. She liked the challenge of dating a blind person and kind of wanted to. And yes, she acknowledged that he was Daredevil because it was outed. But it was kind of, they really played on that relationship really well, to the point where it's not like it felt forced, but it felt very natural and smooth. And, you just wanted to kind of see where their relationship was going. That's what makes a good supporting character as well.
Well, and they carried her through quite a bit.
Yeah, it's the whole run. Almost the whole run, I think.
And even she started picking on him about, like, are you Daredevil? Are you Daredevil?
Yeah.
So it was kind of a fun way to have someone just have a little more fun with it.
And, she motivates him to move out when stuff goes down during these, like, first 2-3 volumes. She motivates him to go outside New York City for the first time in a while. And go to move residents to San Francisco,
which actually, I mean, that can't be understated. That's a huge deal for Daredevil.
Yes,
I mean, he was always like
Hell's Kitchen is his neighborhood. Yeah, that's his backyard.
And like, there's
scummy, but it's his kind of scummy.
Gosh, I should find this. So I'm gonna find this and I'll put it on our Facebook page. But there is a map of New York, and it shows like each neighborhood and like what superhero is in that neighborhood.
Oh, that's cool.
There's like shows the Fantastic Four, like the Baxter Building, and it shows Spider-Man's area, and it shows Daredevil's Hell's Kitchen, and it shows just everyone, Doctor Strange's Sanctum Sanctorum. And it's cool to just show all of those and just say like, this is New York. And for the longest time, New York was superhero haven,
Yeah.
Even the X-Men are just outside of New York.
I think in Westchester.
Yes, Westchester.
Yep.
So for him to move to San Francisco, that is like Spider-Man moving to San Francisco. I mean, it was just a big deal.
It was huge. And, it kind of brought all these creative writing skills. It's like, all right, what if you took a New York superhero and moved him to San Francisco? Well, he doesn't really know where he's going.
Yeah. And
being blind, he has to have his girlfriend like, okay, where am I going? Cool.
And even just he started knowing the rooftops and knowing the alleys and knew where to be. So that's just fun. And I kind of like listen back to our other podcasts and I always think like, gosh, all we say is everything is fun. But, we're purposely picking runs that we are somewhat familiar with and that we also think that is a good crowd pleaser. There's tons of comics out there. There's tons of stories, but, some of these are, I think, highly acclaimed for a reason.
Oh, absolutely.
And this Daredevil story shows the lighter side of Daredevil, if that's a way to say it.
Yeah, for maybe the first time since the 60s.
Yeah.
When he was like hokey and everything. And just kind of brings him back to a not so serious tone while keeping his roots and his legacy and kind of just building off of that. And give him a little break, but man, he still got work for everything.
And he still gets into like predicaments where you're just like, how are you getting out of that? And he still gets into, spots that only Mark Waid could think of. It was like, oh man, like he's just like pulling it out of left field a little bit, but then it all ties together again. There's one artist that I kind of want to give a shout out to, and that's Mike Allred.
Yeah.
Allred is pretty well known in the community as, I don't want to say a simplistic artist because he's not.
No.
But he has a really great feel for moving you through the page and a really great look for like colors and just sharp. Everything he does is sharp.
Yes.
Like bold, and his color palette, actually that's his wife. The colorist is his wife. So it's always Mike and Laura.
Huh.
And for some reason, I think he just connects with Mark Waid like really well.
Sure.
Really well.
I don't think he's did too much Marvel stuff.
No, and that's he did like Silver Surfer, right?
Oh, right. Yeah, he did have that Silver Surfer run.
That's what most people are.
Yeah, with what's
Pop Quiz. Look at this.
Pop Quiz. I did.
His brain is heating up. Fleas are jumping off.
I'll get there.
He's thinking, everyone. You're looking for the artist or the writer?
Writer, yeah. It's Dan.
I don't know.
Oh God. Okay.
Oh,
I'll
right.
get it. I'll get it in a second.
He's got to Google it, people. He has to. He can't let it go. Anyways,
Anyways,
Allred does a pretty good run just in the middle of Mark Waid.
Dan Slott.
Oh, Dan Slott.
Yes.
Dan Slott and Mike Allred.
Yes.
Also a great pairing. Mark Waid and Mike Allred. Also a great
It was
pairing.
working. It was working.
But he shows, I don't know, he just shows like I want to say like a fever, or he shows like a urgency to the characters. He just really lays out every page. You could just randomly flip to any Mike Allred page and there's just action, something's happening. He also did Ecstatics. That's what he did.
Oh, yeah.
Is Mike Allred.
So he has some pretty big claim runs,
Yeah,
to him.
So he
Few
really,
and far between, but
I don't know.
it's quantity over quality,
You focus on the artwork, but it's not like you get drawn into it. It's bright and sharp enough that you're not totally absorbed into all the little fine details.
And then I guess on the opposite side, in the start of volume 2, we have the Punisher, Spider-Man, Daredevil team up, and Mark Checchetto does that with colorist Matt Hollingsworth, and that's like my favorite realistic art style. That's almost out there. I think that they collaborated on Civil War too, and it really makes it feel real. Like you could just see this like on the news or things like that, and it's like you're there too.
Well, and they do like big leaps from one panel to the
very
next.
dynamic and very action packed.
Yeah.
So if that's what you're looking for in your story, that's it.
That's the guy.
That's the guy. That's the team, and it's so cool to see those guys, combine and team up.
And it's kind of a good combo of you could tell it's like loose pencils and digital coloring from there. But again, when you're drawing Daredevil, you have to like draw him where he's moving and leaping and flipping.
Yeah.
And he does a lot of like judo and kicks and just, I don't know, there's just a lot of action on the page, And then when they get to like him being a lawyer, I think they purposefully sort of leave all that out just to say like, here's his real life, which is like reserved and polite, and you're in front of a judge and all that.
And you kind of had to do it to shift the tone back.
Yeah, you have to give people a rest a little bit.
Yeah, because otherwise, if that would have stayed throughout the whole run, it'd be like, oh my God, what's getting hit?
Yeah. You'd be just as exhausted.
Yes, because definitely you want to binge this run. It's good to just go through it and just read all at once. Yeah, you could go jump back forth, but I think it's really cool. Cool, I guess. So, final thoughts and wrapping up. This is a great run. We both loved it. I'm a huge Daredevil fan, so I've never read this run before. And just to read that was just the best. Definitely, I would recommend this to my friends, especially. This isn't really a bad place to start. If you want something more modernized and then going back, it wouldn't be wouldn't be bad. I think.
I mean, first printing here I'm looking up is 2013.
Yeah.
So it came out in 2013. I think he probably had like a few years run. So let me just see. It went from 2013 until 2016.
Yeah,
so 3-year run.
Right. After this run was Chip Zdarsky, who's currently writing Daredevil right now. And he's, from what we hear, he's blowing it out of the park. So definitely check that out if you want to see where Daredevil is right now. I will conclude and wrap up with this last quote that I thought was really cool. That was at the end of Volume 4. So this, I guess in context, Daredevil's kind of doing this will and Last Testament, just in case, he dies.
He's starting to think about it. He never thought about that before. It was kind of like
this futuristic tale, but he was doing it as, it's this inside joke of Mike Murdock and everything. So he's kind of putting this persona on and being Daredevil and things like that. But in the Daredevil costume, he says, "So what can I say that you don't already know? Nothing. There are some of the things that you don't like to admit and a few other things you tend to forget. So before I swing off into the sunset toward whatever destiny has in store for me, which I'm hoping an oceanfront condo on a Pismo beach, just remember, criminals are a superstitious, cowardly lot. Dress accordingly. No matter how bad things get, Spider-Man's life is always worse. Always. And when push comes to shove, make the leap. People might think that it's easy for me to say, but we both know that's not true. What's around the next corner, even what's farther down the block, I am as blind to it as you are, as anyone is. Isn't that great? That's what makes life interesting and funny, touching, and surprising. And yes, scary. But you can't let the big, scary win because you lose out on so much more. Don't ever forget that, Matt. Things get dark, so you're used to the dark. Don't let it stop you. Don't let it even slow you down. Laugh, love, alive, be fearless." And that concludes
that. Is Daredevil.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, if you have a chance, grab this. This is Daredevil by Mark Waid. And again, it's available in quite a few formats. Actually, it's even available digitally. If you have Comixology, most of it's already free. If you have Comixology Unlimited, where you can just read as much as you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, grab the hardcovers, settle in, and we invite you to run through it.
This is Bam Pal Comic Hour with your hosts, Ed Glonner
and Chris Ramos.
Signing off.
Goodbye.